Yeah, Q1, Q2 is still good to go.
Do you have any comments to make on what Ivan just pointed up?
I'll just cut it out. When I said it and Tina was like, Q2 is good to go, that's when you put it in as a clip, 3 seconds, bam, let's go.
No.
Welcome back to The Defiant. I'm your host, Alp. Today we're diving into a complex topic that requires a bit of persistence to fully grasp. It's a subject that requires diligent study, multiple readings, and cross-referencing various sources to truly grasp. And once it clicks, as our guest today mentions, you will think to yourself, why didn't I come up with this? This is the journey of researching EigenLayer. In this episode, our aim is to provide you with a comprehensive guide to EigenLayer, what it is, its purpose, the problems it addresses, the latest developments on the horizon, the risks associated with restaking, and much more. Some say he's the greatest counter signal out there. If he's buying, you better be selling. All we know, he's called Ivan GBI. Ivan, how's it going?
Hi Alp, how you doing? Good to hear from you again. Another episode in the books. Well, about to be. As you know, everybody, Alp doesn't need an intro, but he's had a videos at Defiant, and something you might have not known about him is he has been interning at Boeing for the last 2 years, but recently with all the planes crashing down, he decided to fully focus on crypto. So that's what we are doing here today. Namely, talking about EigenLayer, all things restaking, risks, shitcoins, launchpads, and stuff like that. What I mean with shitcoins, yields, and launchpads is we will be getting into the specifics of how AVSs interact with EigenLayer, what are the developer pain points that EigenLayer is solving, risk parameters, nodes, validators, and everything that's related to it. I learned a lot about it myself because basically today me and Alp were throwing questions at the team and asking the stuff we still didn't fully grasp. So I feel like we pretty much know majority of things we should know at this point, which was very exciting. So I hope you will also learn a lot from this episode. So without further ado, let's jump into the introductions of the team members from EigenLayer, Tina and Teddy, and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I'm Tina. I work on product and research, and I primarily help with the staking and operating team. So primarily our restakers and solo operators, and then the operating firms, as well as work on research and development for communications, go-to-market, and help Teddy with EIGENDA. But I'm super excited to chat about EigenLayer and what we do at Eigen Labs.
And I'm Teddy, and I'm a research engineer at Eigen Labs. My background is in tech and distributed systems, and I've been in crypto for 3 years, but following since 2017. And super excited to talk about all the things we're doing, but more focused on EigenDA.
Why don't we start off with a brief overview of EigenLayer?
Sure. So where to start? So if you haven't heard about EigenLayer, I can give this sort of top-down rundown. EigenLayer is a platform for restaking. The general problem that Sriram and the founders at Eigen Labs saw in the very beginning was that if you ever wanted to start some kind of crypto economic platform, you had this problem of first having to bootstrap a token. Because if you want to incentivize anything, either through slashing or through rewards, you need something to do that incentivization with. And that creates this bootstrapping problem where you can't do anything interesting until you have a token. You can't can't have a token until you first launch and build up interest in your platform. And so EigenLayer saw this opportunity to enable what's called restaking with the main token of the Ethereum ecosystem, ETH, where people are already staking ETH in huge numbers. I think there's 60 billion or something like that staked ETH today, which secures Ethereum as well as Ethereum L2s. And what you can do with EigenLayer is take your staked ETH, either liquid staked or natively staked, and subject it to additional slashing risks. And in exchange, you can also have the opportunity to earn additional rewards on top of your Ethereum staking rewards. And so EigenLayer works at the intersection of stakers, of course, operators, which are the typically, the same companies that run validators for Ethereum and other networks, who run nodes for what we call AVSs, which is the third leg of the stool. And so AVSs are these protocols that register with EigenLayer and make themselves available for operators to serve, and transitively available for restakers to delegate stake to. And so these AVSs come in a variety of shapes and sizes, because there are many different protocols that are interested in putting assets at stake in exchange for rewards. But they sort of form these three categories: operators, restakers, and AVSs form this community of EigenLayer, which we hope will scale the systems of Ethereum and crypto as a whole way beyond the limitations of one token per AVS. And so I can list out, the AVSs come in many different forms. This general platform, this primitive of restaking, enables decentralized sequencers, decentralized oracles, decentralized bridges, decentralized challenger networks for optimistic rollups, decentralized provers for ZK rollups, and basically anything that you would ever use a normal token for, where you'd have slashing and incentives, you can use EigenLayer for. And so it provides this sort of this way to rent security rather than always having to sort of build it on equity.
Makes sense, thank you. So before jumping into the technicals of slashing risks, right, and how validators run and stuff like that, how was the experience with getting basically those AVSs on? What I mean is, I've seen some parallels being drawn where people compare EigenLayer as like a launchpad to an extent, right? Because it's about earlier networks rather than, let's say, you probably don't envision Chainlink or some other bridge coming on right away, right? Like they have their own thing already. If they made their own network, for example, right? Like, I'm not saying they will do it now, but comparatively speaking, that is kind of a launchpad, right? So the goal of launchpads to an extent is always to source that new stuff. So from sourcing it, which categories have been the most easy or the most abundant to onboard? Because as you mentioned yourself, right, Eddie, there are oracles, there are bridges, there are some deep-in type of stuff. So what is it that has been the most easy or the most interesting? Those could be the same thing, or those can be different?
Yeah, so I do think we already have a number that are ready to launch with us for AVS testnet that is coming in the next couple of weeks. Those are AltLayer, Lagrange, Witness Chain Ethos, Hyperlane, and primarily it's Watchtower networks, state proofs, and message passing. So a lot of this is a primary function of what would be supporting the existing restakers and operators on EigenLayer. And I think the protocols that you're referencing later, those are also protocols that would potentially need to be onboarded with time, because why we're doing this in testnet stages, specifically on Goerli, is so that it can be done securely and in a staggered fashion. So I also think there's an element of safety because there's other things at risk. Like we have over 1,000 operators that are validating on Goerli right now on EigenLayer, and that's probably one of the largest operator sets outside of the main Ethereum beacon chain, and also over 1 billion in TVL USD equivalent, and I think that's 3.5 million ETH. So with a lot of that power comes responsibility, and onboarding the AVSs that you're mentioning, like Chainlink, that would be something that has to be done gradually because of the responsibility associated with our existing customer base.
it's quite an impressive list from the start, basically. It's really cool. Without sharing too much back knowledge, actually you should, but you're free not to. What are the things you offer to them as the things to really make the decision? Because conceptually as a vision, that's why everybody likes it. A vision really is clear. A vision really is simple enough, not in a bad way, but in a good way that people are like, oh, okay, makes sense. But still, teams who come in first, they do take that leap of faith to an extent, right? They do add an additional layer of security risk conceptually, not that much, right? But let's say, what are the things you tell them, or how do you convince them? Obviously, you have social reputation going behind you, that's obvious, but anything specifically that you thought that you found out to be working really well when convincing those teams to do it?
Yeah, so if you think about developing an AVS, the benefit of developing a standalone protocol that isn't associated with EigenLayer at all versus developing one built on EigenLayer is completely different. Building a standalone protocol, not only do you deal with the native token inflation that Teddy referenced prior, building out your own operator set, finding validators, and then bootstrapping liquidity is incredibly hard. People don't know this until they're either the founder of their own protocol or they're a developer trying to do this themselves. And the second is the incredible power of dual staking that would be a possibility for all these AVSs. So they don't have self-pressure or inflation that's attached to their own native token. They have the ability to dual stake both ETH and this secondary token, and they also have the ability to bootstrap this existing operator set that we have with EigenLayer. And those are two incredible things that not only alleviate a lot of the pressure of bootstrapping their network as a whole, but scaling. So I think there's a lot of benefits of not just being a standalone protocol and building on EigenLayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the technical bootstrap, that part of the proposition totally makes sense. Just to come back to what you said with regard to liquidity bootstrapping and the native emissions, those don't go anywhere for them though, right? They would have been there anyway. Or am I misunderstanding it? Like if they plan some emission to be there for the validators, right, in their own native asset, they will still continue doing so. I guess not native in this case, but ERC20, for instance, right?
Well, if you're launching your own token, you're dealing with the sell pressure or inflation of that token. But ETH is always going to be this secure asset that will give you optionality if you have the ability to dual stake. And I think like the ability for these AVSs to also use the shared crypto economic security that's been restaked in EigenLayer is also huge because it doesn't have the same volatility as maybe the liquidity attached with their native token.
But to make sure, those validators of EigenLayer that are securing those new subnetworks, or what's the right way to call them? What do you call them? Subnetworks, or AVSs? AVSs is the term? Okay, cool. They still do the emissions in their own token, right? I'm just making sure that I get that part correctly. So that is the AVS part, right? Sourcing those networks could then give their asset as reward to validators. Is that so, or?
So that actual design is still in development, so that hasn't been determined yet. But the dual staking feature is primarily one of the main features of their potential development on EigenLayer. So
that's restake ETH, right? And then it's their asset, basically. Those would be the June model. Okay, cool.
Yes, so it gives the optionality, and that's the main incentive.
Cool. To get more specifics, let's say in dual staking, when the other side of the reward is that new token of that AVS, right, specifically, it is given to valid. Is it like streamed into EigenLayer as a middle layer to an extent, or do all validators just get it separately pro rata as it usually works with staking? What is the concrete model with that? If my question makes sense.
Could you repeat?
Let's say I'm a project, right? I make an AVS and I give rewards in my own token because validators needed to be able to actually choose my network, right? My AVS, to then restake on it. So when I give my reward, where exactly does it go? Is it like separately on the validator set that has chosen me to validate on my AVS, or it somehow goes to them even directly? Like what's the idea with this? Just curious.
We see it as separate right now. The reason is because EigenLayer is focused on ETH, and we want to focus there. But, it does not close the door to AVSs providing this sort of dual quorum model where they can distribute rewards in their own native token.
So is it me correctly understanding it that the first projects are actually focused on giving the rewards fully in ETH? Or
no, so it wouldn't. That design is still in development. So that's something that's been carefully researched by Sriram and the rest of the research team. So it hasn't been decided yet, but the dual staking design has, and that mostly is how we described prior. So the actual payment design and issuance that you're referencing. That hasn't been finalized yet.
Yeah, we went deep into it real quick. So if we were to take a step back, I'm just going to simply ask, what can EigenLayer be used for? Can you name a few use cases for it?
Yeah, sure. So we've been in talks with AltLayer and a variety of other AVS teams that Tina mentioned before. AltLayer is working on this suite of AVSs, so multiple AVSs around a sort of new category that they call restaked rollups, which is the idea is that, if you're launching a rollup, it should be easy to spin up all the sort of variety of things as part of a network rather than as part of, one infrastructure provider for the sequencer. So they are building an AVS around a decentralized sequencer, which has operators running the sequencer that are registered with EigenLayer. A decentralized fast finality layer where pre-confirmations can be given out, and there's a sort of improved user experience with that, as well as a decentralized challenger network. So in the case of optimistic rollups, the entire model is a sequencer is posting batches, but also state roots, and the state roots are assumed to be good if they haven't been disproven over the course of some amount of time, usually a week. And so these decentralized challenger networks incentivize otherwise unincentivized challengers to check the math of the sequencer and make sure that the state roots that the sequencer posted were correct. And if not, then provide a challenge and correct the state roots so that no assets can be stolen or anything like that. So that's sort of a top level view of restaked rollups. We also have one project we're really excited about is called Ethos, which is working to bring restaked Ethereum to the Cosmos ecosystem. And so this will work similar to mesh security or interchain security in Cosmos, where entire networks of Cosmos nodes for specific Cosmos zones can be running on the security basis of EigenLayer or delegated restaked Ethereum to specific operators. Having come just recently from a Cosmos startup before EigenLayer, I can tell you that that's something that really improves the bootstrapping model for a Cosmos chain, to not have to launch its own token or to be able to look at the biggest pool of non-Bitcoin liquidity in crypto and be able to draw on that for crypto economic security.
I think another thing that people don't have context of that Teddy also started discussing is launching a blockchain is just incredibly difficult. Like bootstrapping a validator set is really, really difficult, and also getting liquidity. It's if one, you have first movers advantage, so a lot of the liquidity that joins only has the incentive of like a potential airdrop or rewards later, and a lot of the validators that you see these large blockchains onboard are either existing investors or validator firms that they work with in an investment capacity. So one thing that's really cool about EigenLayer is the operator working group. It has like this huge breadth of operators that are decentralized across the world. We have a number of solo stakers that have incredible technical experience and developer backgrounds. We have firms that vary from like Japan to Turkey to parts of the EU to parts of the US. And as I mentioned prior, there's over 1,000 of them. And we have these huge operator working group calls where we constantly keep them engaged. So that sourcing process, like that's not someone that if you're trying to launch your own blockchain or bootstrap EigenLayer as a whole, all of that work, that quality assurance work, is essentially outsourced, and you maintain a quality of decentralization for your network as a whole, and then also for your validator set. So that's the biggest benefit I see, because you're not risking any of these efforts to speedline your protocol development.
Since you touched upon the upchain thesis, or maybe we should call it the AVS thesis at this point in time, why hasn't it been done before? Because the idea is so elegantly simple, right? And the upchain thesis in terms of like software development always made sense to people, right? But the biggest issue with that was like everybody was saying a dApp isn't going to make their own shitcoin and give it to validators, right? They're just too much work. Like it's going to be absolutely massive. So your solution, EigenLayer solution, is so natively, nicely solving that thing. So is it just us not knowing about this research and development that was actually 5 years ago? Or is it like literally how old is it? Like 1.5 years old?
Well, Shriram has been doing P2P research for like close to 8 years. If you look at some of his DA research, which I definitely wanted to discuss EigenDA with Teddy here, he did P2P research and pivotal research that would contribute to discussions about data availability and consensus with a number of key other EF stakeholders 7 to 8 years ago. As well as that, he was in early discussions about a lot of these research conversations prior. So when people say like EigenLayer's success is something that's recent, or the pivot into EigenDA is also something that's recent, Shriram did a really incredible thread showcasing a lot of this work, and then also showcasing a paper he reviewed that Mustafa, the creator of Celestia, also co-wrote. So he's been a part of these early conversations for a number of years, and it's mostly because EigenDA is part of this huge programmable trust marketplace that Teddy referenced prior, that is now becoming a part of conversation, because this marketplace had to take time to be built. So like restaking, that was a huge feature. As you mentioned, there's slashing contracts, staking contracts, and then like securely onboarding all of this liquidity, and then onboarding all of those operators, that also took time. So a lot of people didn't have an idea of all of these different product features, and then EigenDA as a whole, because they only saw the beginning, because that was what was live on Mainnet or Goerli for testnet. But this has been research that the research team has been doing for a number of years.
Cool.
We see it as sort of there was some superstition in the beginning around what staking was, right? Like this model, I remember when proof of work was the only thing that we knew was true, and that maybe proof of stake can work, and it hasn't been hacked yet. And after we put 5 years of proof of stake experimentation and various other chains under our belt, it started to become clear that proof of stake would work. And I think that this is sort of EigenLayer is a step on that continuum towards the realization that not only can you subject assets to slashing and rewards from a single protocol, you can do the same with multiple protocols and incur a linear increase in risk rather than some kind of quadratic increase in risk. And so, the exact line you draw between one protocol and the next, let's say Ethereum introduced some new, set of slashing risks that would, change the dynamics of exactly what the security model of Ethereum is. Well, with EigenLayer and restaking, you as a user get to decide exactly what you opt into in terms of slashing risks and in terms of potential rewards. And I guess it might seem very obvious in hindsight. We have a colleague, Kaido, who just put out a little like tweet thread about how you could have invented EigenLayer. And I definitely feel that way, like in retrospect. But I guess that's the mark of a good idea.
Very good context. Thank you for sharing that. Didn't know some of it, so pretty cool, pretty cool. Before jumping into EigenDA, because Alp has the context and the questions for that, if you don't mind stopping a bit on the slashing part. So when we talk about slashing, where exactly does slashing actually happen and who determines those rules? Is it like everyone separately? Is it EigenLayer as a protocol? And then you kind of like have some subcategories for slashing? And what are the risks associated with slashing? Because to jump like into context, I'm a moron in this. And okay, in many other topics as well, let's be honest, we all know it. The networks, the AVSs themselves, right? That's not where the consensus itself is, right? It's kind of like the rules on main chain, if I understand correctly. I'll shut up in this case. This is the driver into you actually explaining to me how this works. Please.
Yeah, sure. So any slashing condition must be what's called objectively attributable, which means that you if provided proof, you can, actually verify that proof to show that somebody misbehaved in some way or was incompetent. And that's true of any slashing condition on any chain. And one of the properties of that kind of verifiable fraud is that it can be verified outside of the actual operator set or native chain that it's originating on. And so let's say, there's an EigenDA operator that signs off on a chunk of data that, the person distributing the data claims that this data corresponds to a KZG commitment. And let's say that, it actually doesn't. And the operator is supposed to check that. Well, if the operator signs off on receiving this data and storing this data, even though it doesn't correspond to the commitment that it was associated with, then you have this proof. You have the operator's signature alongside this KZG commitment and the data which can be verified to have been to not match that. So that proof can be posted on Ethereum. And when we implement slashing for EigenDA, this is how it will work. It'll be posted on Ethereum through a standard transaction to the EigenDA contracts, which interact with the EigenLayer contracts. So these EigenDA contracts are registered with EigenLayer and have the authority to tell EigenLayer to slash a particular operator. So at launch and for at least the near term, any sort of slashing condition that turns out to be invoked by one of the AVS contracts undergoes a 7-day window during which the multi-sig of EigenLayer could potentially interfere with or basically interrupt that slash and prevent it from happening. And this is sort of a safety mechanism to make sure that in the event of some kind of erroneous slashing event, that we wouldn't destroy a lot of value for no reason. But the point of that multisig is to ensure that the slashing mechanism is working as intended, but not to let operators off the hook if they violate slashing conditions. But yeah, that's the sort of overall.
So if I were to put it into some kind of a graph, right? Let's say the Ethereum network is here, right? And they restaked and whatever contracts are on this level. Then the AVSs are on top. And basically everything is glued together with an EigenDA in between, right? So it's neither the AVS's logic, it's neither the main chain contracts, it's really the EigenDA kind of being like a gluing piece in between, as to say. If that makes sense. No. Maybe that's totally wrong.
So EigenDA is just an example of an AVS and one which might have a slashing condition.
Okay, so not all the AVSs refer to that for the slashing purposes, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so every AVS is going to have its own set of contracts on Ethereum which manage slashing and rewards. And any person who wants to report fraud is going to send a transaction to those contracts.
Okay, so the slashing basically is a mainnet Ethereum chain, and okay, makes sense.
So what do you think about the implication of simplifying the process for like making projects like just benefiting from the EigenLayer through the network and validator sets? Like, what do you think is going to be the outcome of this in the long term?
So you're pointing to probably the belief that people will be launching shitcoins is what I'm
That's
I'm assuming.
one side of it.
Yes, but I do not. I think people are going to do that regardless. That will always happen, and the retail consumer market will always pursue that. They will probably do it on alternative chains. It's probably happening on Tron or Avalanche right now. But what I think will happen is that EigenLayer is going to power an incredible amount of applications that potentially are built on top of a lot of these AVSs, and they're built more securely. They have an insurance mechanism to support them, and it'll have more protection for users. So more protections in cost efficiency. So like on average, transactions will be a lot lower because they'll be built on EigenDA, and trading volume won't be burning the same level of ETH fees that they're burning on a protocol like Lyra and Avo right now. So it'd be drastically decreased on a user front. And then the second benefit as a whole would be that a lot of these protocols that are potentially built on the rollups that are using EigenDA would be able to provide potentially insurance through like mechanisms like StakeShare. So this is something that's kind of probably like a game changer, because insurance really, it doesn't exist in DeFi. It doesn't exist in the wallet space. And I think we've seen platforms like Nexus Mutual attempt to solve this problem, and they provide underwriting or capital to DeFi protocols for a certain summation, but that insurance doesn't really get to the end user. So these slashing contracts that you mentioned, and the real accessibility that it's helping to make possible for the end user, that's what I see as like the final gates, is like really protecting the end user through the insurance mechanism, and then the slashing protections that will allocate funds to them at the end, because users aren't seeing any of that. And if we want to really onboard users that understand a typical traditional finance or consumer finance lens that wouldn't be working in a tech-based industry, that's how we have to get them through trust and safety.
When you talk about insurance, are you talking about the insurance of networks malfunctioning or the products and apps built on top of them? Because the former, right, the whatever network malfunctions, right, those don't happen. Like, that's not how people suffer, right? It's mostly the contracts on top working or getting hacked, right, working wrong. So are you also referring to that or no?
Well, actually both, because if you look at Polygon was down because of their validators. So the validator set that I was referencing prior being 1,000 different validators that are reliable and providing signatures, and the non-signing rates are incredibly low. Our non-signing rates are probably 7%. That's not happening on a lot of other chains. So if you want to scale a large DeFi application on these chains, that's not even a possibility. Then the second reference that you made in reference to the contracts, if you know that each transaction you're making on a DeFi protocol that is built on a rollup that is using EigenDA is fully insured, you have no fear as a user making that transaction if you know that it's fully insured and you're receiving a slashable amount based on that transaction. So like there's so much added security from all of these different product features that we're discussing that it's not just one problem it's solving. Mm-hmm.
But those, let's say, because I do DeFi things, right? Many of the hacks are not deterministic in terms of you cannot say who's at fault, right? Some of them are Oracle manipulations. Other ones are kind of like causing AMMs to malfunction to an extent, right? And all of that stuff. And the issue is not, you can, for example, specify in a somewhat deterministic way what can be done and what cannot be done in terms of like insurance coverage, right? But what about the second order effects and the third order effects, right? A protocol gets hacked, due to that influences another protocol, due to that some perps, for example, are making money for somebody else who took the other side of the position, who are not actually hackers by themselves, right? They just benefited. So you probably didn't mean to go that far. I'm just asking, like, I think I saw a couple of projects trying to put like invariants into sequencers essentially, and that is a way to kind of track what is right and what is wrong in a deterministic way. So that could be built on top, of course. But yeah, I just wanted to see whether there is something, something else to it.
Yeah, no, I think you said it well, that there are a few different kinds of slashing risks. There's insurance risks. There's sort of catastrophic contract risk where there's some vulnerability. There's then slashing risk, which you might want to insure. And then finally, as a user, you might have a certain amount of risk associated with reorgs. And so you're, interested in doing some kind of hybrid transaction where you're spending crypto, but or maybe you're receiving crypto and you're giving away something in the physical world. And in that case, a reorg can actually be equivalent to, losing that physical item because you don't have the crypto associated with having sold it. And so that kind of risk is something we're thinking about a bit with something called StakeSure, which is essentially a way of making it so that you can pay for insurance for that exact event happening, and then you can actually prove that that event happened, so that after the fact you have compensation for the fact that you gave away whatever, your gold, and you didn't receive your crypto. Well, you redeem your insurance and then you actually do receive your crypto anyway. So that kind of thing is something that we're thinking about as well.
Cool. Thank you for explaining. You are right, and that's what Alp's question was about, right? What about those shitcoins launching on top? But that's the nature of permissionless composable design, right? The answer is you can do anything, but end of the day, people would want to ask, okay, you can do anything, but that's not really an answer, right? Uniswap, you can make any coin, but the top three, or for lending protocol, right? The top three always is 90% of the volume, TVL, whatever it is. So naturally jumping into what you think, that is one of the main cases, right? You seem to think it's EigenDA as the main ones, or let's say the top two right now that you believe in. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah, selfishly, yes.
So why is that so?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about EigenDA. So EigenDA is the other product that Eigen Labs is working on, and it originally started as a sort of a proof of concept of an AVS, but soon sort of like developed this character of its own as an opportunity to build a better DA layer. Or to build, a DA layer that wasn't just based on a trusted committee. And since then, it's sort of grown into a team of 15 engineers with a product in Goerli testnet with 200 operators and the power of, the testnet stake behind it, and launching on Mainnet in late Q1, early Q2. And EigenDA works on the basis of operators who are registered with EigenLayer, who receive chunks of distributed data and do various verification on those chunks, and then serve those chunks back when requested to roll-up nodes who are wishing to rederive the roll-up chain from the data on EigenDA. And I guess the first question you're going to have about EigenDA is, what sets it apart? Why is it different? And so the answer to that is a few things. So there are two things you could compare EigenDA to. One is just a plain committee-based DA layer, and this would be something like AnyTrust from Arbitrum. And this is how Arbitrum Nova works and has very cheap gas fees. Rather than sending their batches of L2 transactions to Ethereum, where call data is expensive, they send batches to this set of Arbitrum run nodes, committee nodes, which store the data that consists of the L2 blocks. And then they post references to that data on Ethereum. So rather than posting the whole L2 block to Ethereum, they're posting just references to the L2 block, which exists on AnyTrust. And so EigenDA is an improvement over this on the basis of obviously being decentralized trust. It's not some sort of like fixed proof of authority committee. It's operators that opt in, many operators that opt in. And I guess that's one advantage. The second advantage is that it scales linearly. So the model where you have a fixed set of operators does not work that great when you're sending all of the data to all of the operators. So that means any sequencer that wants to broadcast a new L2 block has to write 12 times or 20 times. With EigenDA, there was this core insight that basically no distributed system does storage in the way that blockchains do storage. Like if you're running an Ethereum node, you're receiving every single block header no matter what. And this is actually, a real strength of blockchains is that they're very good at coming to consensus. But in practice, especially for an L2, you don't need to come to consensus over the data itself. It's actually good enough just to come to consensus over references to the data, which are verifiable. And so EigenDA takes this insight and makes it possible for sequencers to send a sort of redundantly encoded version of the data to a subset of EigenDA nodes. And this makes it so that essentially as nodes join the network and as the right capacity of EigenDA increases, so does the ability for sequencers to write to EigenDA and for L2 throughput to increase.
All Professor coins are great. No, let me try it differently. I remember when there were Professor coin fights last cycle, and by Professor coins, I'm referencing something deeply technical and research stage, right, to an extent. I remember Emin from Avalanche was just running around Telegram chats and literally and Kevin as well, just shitting around at everybody. I think they still do that partly. I don't know, maybe it's like their winning motto, like a marketing trick. But yeah, hopefully you guys can come to peace and have your own markets all at the same time, right? Speaking of that, referencing some kind of rivalry, I remember the OP situation, right, recently, which I think you guys cleared up, so all good. I don't have a question on that. I have a question a bit on choose an OP stack, right? So if I understand correctly, you were saying, Tina, that you can build different even DeFi applications on top with embedded security and insurance, whatever. When we speak of fragmentation, right, OP stack has chosen its own standard where OP chains can intercommunicate, right, and basically be its own ISO standard as it's known in the real world to an extent, I guess. But every ecosystem has its own standard. Is that correct to say? So for example, Polygon ZK EVMs, they are not, let's say, same standard as OP chains, right? Not the same as ZK Sync, not the same as subnets. So would it be correct to say that you have so far chosen OP stack to be the winning one? Or is it actually easily switchable and configurable to have them kind of like as a level playing field? My question might not make sense at all. I'm just throwing it at you. You figure out what I asked, because I don't know.
Yeah, so we have a number of integrations that are coming. Teddy will discuss them in more technical detail, but just because OP Stack was recently launched, in no way are we only launching with them. We are doing what's right for the AVSs that are potentially building on us and the whole ecosystem within our marketplace. We're also working with a number of other teams for integrations. And one thing I also wanted to know is there isn't really a rivalry, I think, between the two previous DA teams that we mentioned, because I have nothing but love for the Celestia team, and I think Teddy does as well. And I actually think the user bases are very different, because someone that wants a whole programmable trust decentralized marketplace versus someone that just wants a standalone DA product, very, very different use cases. So, yeah, I just wanted to note that. But Teddy can go into all of our integrations because he's actually leading that.
Yeah. I mean, so, as I wouldn't want to describe EigenDA without putting it in context. So that's all I wanted to do there. But the integrations for EigenDA are planned to basically be completely unopinionated. We have to do them in order just to do each one justice and focus on the security model of each one. as well as the fact that EigenDA is a growing team and has limited resources. But we're working on an integration with Nitro and Orbit for the Arbitrum ecosystem next, as well as right on down the line to Polygon CDK, ZK Sync, and a variety of others. So yeah, we're super excited about this sort of like new layer of L2 compatibility. We hope it doesn't become too walled off, but for us, it's just a mission to scale these L2s, and if we can do that, we'll be happy.
I have one last question before Alp completely murders me. So I don't even know how to. The previous questions I asked in a very shitty way. This is going to be even worse, so please prepare for that. So when you run those nodes, right, and validation for other AVSs, right, do you expect it to be the same validator set as it is right now? I know it doesn't matter, right, because it could be current validators as well as home run nodes, right, and whatever else. But in terms of the environment where you run those nodes and the capacity and the limits it has, do you feel the way that I'm getting at? I just wanted to understand this topic better. Like, as you complicate, or you don't complicate, as you complicate that environment, or how they call it, the cluster, or like whatever, where is the limit, or is there no limit and I just fully misunderstand what it is?
So you're asking, is somebody who's running an EigenDA node at home subject to like onerous system requirements or bandwidth requirements? Is that the question?
And let's say, yeah, as more AVSs pop up and everything else, right, how much, not bandwidth, not the right word, right? Complexity, I don't know, or cost or whatever. Yeah, somewhat, it is getting to the thing that you mentioned. Yes, please. Just wanted to understand that more.
Yeah, sure. So I guess a little bit more focused around EigenLayer, not EigenDA. So as a user, when you have some Ethereum restaked or staked Ethereum that you wish to restake on EigenLayer, your choices are not in terms of the AVSs. They're actually in terms of the operators. So you choose operators that you'd like to restake with. The operator, any given operator is going to have some kind of description of the various protocols they're running, AVS protocols, as well as expectations for rewards. And so by restaking with any given operator, you are restaking with those AVSs that they're running. So as an operator, switching over to the operator's perspective, you can choose exactly which protocols you want to run. If you only want to run one protocol on top of EigenLayer, you're free to do that. If you want to run multiple and manage a cluster of different services, you can do that too. So in terms of complexity, it's totally opt-in.
Mm-hmm. How fast does the complexity grow? Because to put it in perspective, Solana often gets frowned upon for the size, right, of the nodes and whatever you need to actually be a validator. Comparatively speaking, let's say if I have 5 networks, 5 AVSs, right? Again, speaking from the operator perspective, how much of a difference that is? Like how big are we talking in that sense? If there are numbers, or maybe there aren't, you can't really estimate it right now. Just curious on that.
Well, so I used to work at a validator called Stakefish, and we would run on the order of 30 or 40 different networks at the sort of peak. And that was a manageable amount of complexity. It scaled with the number of engineers we had to manage the DevOps. But it wasn't some kind of like technical restriction at all, more of an organizational one. And so we see it the same way. Any given operator can choose to sort of be a one-man show or incorporate and have the help of other engineers. But it's not really a technical problem in any way.
What can you share about the second phase of the mainnet launch? What can we expect? What are the key features of this launch?
Yeah, so super excited about our upcoming AVS testnet. So as I mentioned prior, we had one launch that was focused on restakers, and then we've had a number of LSD additions. One that was within the recent 2 weeks that was adding 3 different new LSTs. and also an LST race that was done by the community. And then we had our operator launch, and that was primarily launching the feature for delegation and onboarding operators on Goerli. What our upcoming AVS testnet is launching the AVSs that me and Teddy referenced prior, like EigenLayer, like Lagrange, on our Goerli deployment, and then having a small operator set then onboarded to this AVS testnet to start validating for them. And this is obviously done in the staggered fashion that we mentioned prior, to do testing and QA. But this is really exciting because this is probably one of the last thresholds that we're going to achieve before launching Mainnet. So after this, we're going to be slowly launching a number of other AVSs. And then we will be launching live on Mainnet. So super exciting, because we'll have a full marketplace. Right now it's only been 2 sides of 3. So. And
we've heard from Sriram that we can expect that in Q1, Q2, or do you have like a hard date on it at the moment?
Yeah, Q1, Q2 is still good to go.
Do you have any comments to make on what Ivan just pointed up?
I'll just cut it out. When I said it and Tina was like, Q2 is good to go, that's when you put it in as a clip, 3 seconds, bam, let's go.
No.
I mean, somebody can cut it out,
Token
right?
confirmed.
It's not Alp, it's just some fake Twitter account, like an EigenLayer fan or something, yeah.
EiGEN, well, I just want to be clear. There are no plans. Right now we are focusing on our mainnet launch. They're primarily on board our AVS projects, and we're also focusing on mainnet, so onboarding the number of operators that have been that we've been discussing on Goerli to mainnet, and having them validate for a lot of these AVSs as they provide off-chain computation. So that's primarily our focus. I know you're interested in other things, but we are not working on anything like that right now. So not at this time.
But there is some sort of a tease going on, right? Because you're distributing points on a secondly basis. So what can you share about what those points will translate into in the future, or what they mean right now? What can you share about that?
Yeah, so if you are a restaker, a native restaker, or you've set up an EigenPod, there is a time average restaking point system that was done by our incredible research team that's actually written in documentation, and it's live on the EigenLayer site. And those are a measure of the contribution of shared security for the EigenLayer protocol. So they just measure your staking participation equal to the time integrated amount that you've staked. And why this is important is because as stake distribution grows on the protocol, this is something that people need to know in the representation index of them as a staker. So it's really important for decentralization. It's important for the TVL health and security of the protocol. And I understand why a lot of people think how to measure the value of these point systems, because how they've done traditionally in the past. But that's kind of what it represents right now too.
So what can you share about the potential risks associated with restaking, especially in terms of systemic risk and increased leverage on the Ethereum blockchain?
Yeah, so I think that the risk of EigenLayer is something that comes to mind immediately when people learn about EigenLayer the first time. I think the first thought is, why didn't I think of that? And the second thought is like, this is why I didn't think about that. You know, there's obviously all this risk, but I think that it's often misunderstood as something that poses systemic risk as opposed to sort of one-off risk, where EigenLayer does not introduce any sort of domino effect between different protocols that are operating on EigenLayer. That means that in the event of a slashing condition being invoked, that may result in a decrease in security, but that decrease in security is never going to trigger some other sort of slashing event on the basis of that decrease in security. So the thing to watch with EigenLayer, and this is true with literally any amount of staking, is exactly to what risks are my assets subject. If you go and restake with 10 different protocols, maybe 9 of those protocols are safe in the sense that operators are doing a good job. The slashing conditions are well defined. They're not like likely to be triggered. But if that 10th AVS has a slashing condition that an operator doesn't manage well, maybe they miss an upgrade or something like that, and you suffer a slashing, then that's something that you could have potentially anticipated, at least as a risk, beforehand. And so so essentially the fact that the stake is not ever actually changing hands, you're not actually, like, it's not like a loan or a bond where if you were to use a piece of collateral twice or 3 times, then that would subject your system to some kind of domino effect risk. Unlike that, with restaking, the money is always held in escrow on EigenLayer's contracts, and there's no risk of this sort of like total collapse scenario that I think people sometimes jump to in their head. But yeah, I think that as a restaker, your job is to evaluate exactly what are the risks of any given AVS that an operator that you might restake to is running.
So the concern around like cascading failures is just overly thought around, you're saying? Like there's the possibility of that happening is minimal?
Yes. Well, so these protocols, there should be no protocol that has any kind of slashing condition that is based on the total amount of security provided to that protocol. If that were the case, then we would get into trouble, but there's no reason you would ever want to place some kind of slashing condition on the total amount of stake at risk for the protocol. And so if one slashing condition occurs, the security, decreases some amount. And we, really don't expect any other slashing conditions to occur on the basis of that decrease in security.
I mean, Ethereum Foundation in general seems to just because they have to do it in such a safe way, they often go overboard. For example, the past half a year has been filled with research on what if all Ethereum gets staked? And everybody who has ever been on the operator side, guys, listen, you can have some edge cases, and then there are cases that are practically impossible. So that just feels like one of those, honestly. There are probably risks once you start looping it, and obviously people will loop it, right? Whatever other tools and projects that we might or might not have bags of, let's say, start doing those kind of stuff. That can happen, but it's not EigenLayer's core thing, right? It's like saying, oh, what if somebody buys and sells a lot of Ethereum at the same time? You're an infra, it's not your thing what you do.
No, but I do think we do a good level of risk modeling and analysis. We heavily advise and discuss with the EF a lot of the research that the research team is doing. Shriram and Robert Shobik, our head of research, a number of ideas that they have in early stage development and R&D before it's even implemented. So those are ideas that they get consensus from the EF team from. A second thing is there is a lot of risk modeling that's done that people don't see behind the scenes. So one good example is the attributable security that Teddy was referencing. In a concept like EigenCert that is being built right now for EigenDA or different AVSs that are underlying, a lot of thinking is done between how those signatures for EigenCert will be will be aggregated, and then how these are going to be posted to Mainnet, and then what the signature verification cost is going to be for AVSs, and then how that will potentially be a risk for AVS consumers or the AVSs themselves. If, let's say, like Oracle AVSs, like Chainlink that you mentioned prior in our conversation, change to EigenCert, and what the general economic security of a DeFi application is with EigenCert and the Oracle on EigenLayer. So a lot of that risk modeling analysis and thinking goes on internally in discussions, and it's just something that we don't publish. We definitely want to publish more, but we do think about it, and like we also do heavily engage the EF because we love a lot of the work they're doing, and even though they're slow, and like you're referencing, they do it with good reason. They do it because like there's so many applications that are built on top of them, protocols that are built on top of them, and so many other blockchains that look to them for their research practices. So I understand why they're slow. Slow and steady.
So speaking of that, have you done the number? Since you're saying you do a lot of risk modeling and everything, which is true, you've seen, I think, some of that, whatever you posted. Speaking of numbers, what numbers of projects coming in and given emissions makes a dent in terms of total amount of Ethereum being restaked, right? Because that's part of the risk modeling as well. Like how much, when is a dent going to be created based on that? Let's say how much of yield needs to be given for any meaningful amount of Ethereum to be restaked. If my question makes sense, right? Those are the numbers that some people were running on Twitter. Like they're like, okay, if they're like 10 projects, for example, each one of them gives like even 5 million in emissions annualized. That's 5 extra % of yield for 1 billion worth of Ethereum, right? And they were like, okay, they're just like 1% of Ethereum, 2% of Ethereum restaked, right? So they're like, what is the issue really? So what are the numbers? Anyway, those numbers, what is it in your head recently based on that kind of context?
I think the market will decide exactly what, amount of rewards equates to what amount of stake.
What do you think will make people move? Because, for example, when you look at Aave or any other DeFi lending protocol for stable, right? Aave can be given as low as 2%, and for people to make the jump onto the other one, it has to be usually like at least 2 times higher, right? So when people are saying, oh, my protocol is giving 3 and Aave 2, I'm so much better, why are they not coming here? No, there needs to be a huge jump, because any amount of extra work, any amount of extra risk, even if it's tiny, it needs to be multitudes higher compared to what the baseline you're already used to, right? And that's why we haven't seen that much penetration of LSDFI into LSDs. Pretty much entire LSDFI is just Maker and Spark STETH, right? And Aave at this point. Like that's like, what was it? Last time I checked was like 2 out of 50 billion of that back in the days. And the rest people just didn't take any gamble with it. So in this case, what are just some of your estimations? How much yield is going to make people move? That's what I'm asking. I know the market will decide it. I'm just curious about your thoughts, because that probably was part of the research to an extent.
So I don't think that's part of the research, because like what I was discussing is how AVSs and applications, how AVSs will potentially affect AVS consumers, and then how AVSs are going to be affected by the signature aggregation implications of something like EigenCert affecting AVS consumers then for DeFi applications or Oracle AVSs that are building on EigenLayer. Why I think it's different is because I think you're referencing Aave that has an end user that sees like a difference in yield, and they see a numeric value in that yield difference, and that's their baseline for comparison across these collateralizing or lending protocols, right? The end user is not going to know the differences between their AVS that is potentially the underlying infrastructure for that application, that DeFi application that uses that Oracle AVS. They won't know the details of that infrastructure. What they are going to know, though, is how that improves the costs when they're making their transaction. All AVS consumers and potentially traders or anyone that's processing these transactions based on this infrastructure, they only care about one thing: lower costs. And if you look at any analysis that has been done about AVSs on EigenLayer, EigenDA as a whole, EigenLayer has and EigenLayer's protocol and EigenDA has repetitively shown as the most cost-effective solution every single time. And that's all users care about is low cost and lower fees for transactions. So that's what I think is referencing what I think you're alluding to, like how you're going to get users when like the users don't care about any of the underlying infrastructure, at least the consumer user that we're referencing. So reduce costs and...
Yep, thank you. I meant also stakers in a way, but your reply touches upon that anyway. So I think like you answered both at the same time. Thanks.
Yeah, the exact number of yield increase that will be required for any given AVS to hit its security target is something that they're going to have to determine experimentally.
Curious to see what it is, right? People throw really different numbers. They throw from 2% plus, right, to all the way up to 5 plus extra, I mean. So curious like how that will find penetration in it. Because end of the day, it is a somewhat of a reasonably safe way to get exposure to another asset, right, as an E3 staker. Kind of like I don't know, like if you stake BNB on Launchpad and then you get new asset, somewhat of a way like that, right? Like distant comparison, but slightly. And end of the day, you could see it as a way to get exposure to another network or to another AVS, I mean, that you might like. And you might think that valuation of that asset would be much higher. So you can be staking now for 2%, expecting 10. So it really depends, as you said yourself, Terry, on the market and how people perceive it.
Okay, let's look ahead. Roadmap for 2024. What are EigenLayer's primary goals and milestones for next year?
So EigenLayer's primary goal is to launch to Mainnet. I think that one's pretty clear. And we're also, obviously, as part of that process, going through several layers of audits and community building. We're going to have a presence at ETH Denver. We're going to run hackathons, do workshops, and try and jumpstart this idea of launching protocols as AVSs and renting security before owning it. And if we can get that going and launch, then I think we'll be in a good place.
What advice would you have to developers looking to build on EigenLayer and investors interested in the platform?
I would say I think that EigenLayer presents a opportunity for builders in the same way that Ethereum presented an opportunity for builders, all those years back when it was the first general permissionless blockchain. And the idea of borrowing trust and, building something that can be run by a huge operator set and used by a huge number of users right off the bat is, incredibly cool to me. And so if that, sounds cool to you too, check out our docs and see if you can build something simple like a decentralized Oracle just to start, or, something that just, demonstrates that EigenLayer works. And then from there, the possibilities are endless with the, those two carrot and stick behaviors that you can implement with EigenLayer. Okay, so if you're a developer and you're interested in building on EigenLayer, check out our AVS testnet. And if you are going to market, contact Tina or Bree on Twitter.
Well, fantastic. This was a great conversation. Very happy to meet you both, and looking forward to what happens with EigenLayer this year.
Yes, thanks guys for having us.
Thanks, guys.